Welcome to Leave No Doubt. I've been joined by ex-professional and co-owner of Momentum Sports Management Agency, Brian Howard. Brian, how you doing?
Good to see you, mate. Nice to be finally invited on. Obviously, you had to get the big hitters on first to get the followers, and then finally dragged down to myself.
No, I don't know many other big hitters than you, mate. I really appreciate your time and thank you for being here. I want to give the listeners obviously some sort of perspective on you before we start, as to the success of your playing career before we get into all things agency. You made over 400 appearances in your career, more than half of them in the Championship. You started off as a 17-year-old for Swindon and went on to represent Barnsley, Reading, Sheffield United and Portsmouth, among others. Important moments in your career include FA Cup quarter-final winning goals away to Liverpool, promotion via the playoffs with Barnsley, PFA Championship Team of the Year selections. It's fair to say you had a fantastic football career, mate, and even myself as an ex-teammate of yours, I can confidently say that you were one of the most technically gifted guys that I ever the pleasure of playing with. When you look back at your career, what do you think the best version of yourself looked like? And can you describe that version of Brian Howard to me?
I think it was probably, obviously, it was a little bit of a change there at the start. You said, obviously, 17 at Swindon. I was at Southampton until I was 20. So signed there as a 10-year-old, was involved in the England youth set up from 15 to under 20s. And I think those years, again, it was technically, I knew I was very good, but I didn't realise then the work you had to put in off the ball. And it probably wasn't until, I probably went to Swindon, first team football, playing week in, week out with men, that realised that I wasn't going to fulfil my potential with my ability until I got myself to the front of the running. And I had to get myself fitter. I had to do runs that I didn't want to do. But that enabled me then to be a better footballer, and my technical ability then came out.
As a child, you were always technically gifted. At what sort of age was it, that sort of 20-year-old period where you left Southampton, that you realised how important fitness was to becoming an elite player?
I think just before I left Southampton, Gordon Strachan came in as manager. And it's like when a new manager comes in, it's always, you're not fit enough. But Gordon Strachan was spot on. We weren't fit enough as a group, as a first team group, and then us youngsters coming through to push the first team. So it was very much then into running, lots of runs. Every Monday morning was box to boxes, 40s and 80s twice a week if you weren't playing. And then all of a sudden, the fitness really kicked in. And then once you got into games and into training, you're like, wow, the game became easier. I didn't have to do a bit of skill that I was always used to doing to get out of trouble. I was already half a yard away, so then I actually could play the pass that I'd already seen. I didn't have to wait, a couple of seconds. And I think it's so important, the fitness-wise, and as the game progressed, and I think that was probably in a time, so that was probably what, early 2000s, that football probably started to change. The culture changed. More and more foreign players come to the country. People started to look after themselves better. And fitness really came into it, rather than just people relying on natural ability.
So were you able to, in the position you are now, obviously with Momentum, to fall back on your playing career quite a lot, obviously, when you're reaching out to players, when you're trying to give them advice, when they're reaching out to you with circumstances or situations that they're in? How much do you call upon the experiences you had as a player?
All the time, really. I've met a few young players and families in the last couple of weeks, and I've sat there and I've sat where you are. I've been a young player. I mean, I remember being 15 years old, and agents sat in my parents' front room, trying to get me as a client and trying to say, we can move you to this club, we can move you to that club, or we can get you a better deal at Southampton. So I've lived through it from 15 years old right the way through to then highs of playing for England, to signing my next pro contract, getting a pro contract early, to then moving on, and the disappointment of then not making the first team at Southampton, which was always the goal, to then a small time at Chelsea, then the knockback of Abramovich coming in, signing all the players, so I wasn't going to play at Chelsea either. So then the realisation you need to go and play men's football, you always look and go drop down, but I didn't feel I was dropping down to Swindon. I was stepping up to men's football. So I've been through all these situations from a young age, and then throughout my career. You talk about picking up injuries, obviously your body changes throughout your career, you get older. So every experience I've been through, so I think I look through all of my players, that even to ones now that are getting to 34, 35, that are on about their next progression in their career, I've been in those situations as well. So I feel that I can offer honest and reliable advice that I've lived through those situations, or I've been in dressing rooms or had teammates that have been in those same situations.
I think modern day football, obviously, the importance of an agent is very relevant these days, and probably very rare that you'd find a player that doesn't have one. But when you were a player, obviously, and doing very well, how important was an agent to you as a player?
Yeah, really important. You look at it and you have a really short career, as you know, and I think you have times where you're performing particularly well, and you think you got to really maximise those years. Obviously, the elite now, the great contracts are there, and it's about staying there. But I think there's times where you've really got to have that career progression, that career planning of the right moves at the right time to get yourself to the top and stay there.
I'm glad that you touched on the circumstances with the Chelsea and Abramovich taking over there, because we're going to get that into that in a little bit. But to get us started on sort of your perception of agency, and because hopefully in this conversation, obviously everything we do on the Leave No Doubt podcast is to try and help players improve. It's quite often that players' perceptions on agents are given in the media, and it's going to be really interesting to get your opinion on what an agent's perspective of a player is. But to get us started, what, in your opinion, is an agent's responsibility? Like, what are you fully responsible for in a player's life?
Well, I think mine would be different to some agents. Every agent has their own way. But mine is player protection and career planning. 100% always put the player first, and always put the right move or the right contract for the player at the front. There's plenty of deals that myself and my business partner Phil, we obviously know well, we could have done a lot of deals that would have been financially better for ourselves, but weren't right for the players. So we always make sure that the player comes first. And it's really why I wanted to do this. Obviously, you were with me at the end of my career, and it was always, do you go down the coaching route? Do you try and get into the media, or do you go down the agent route? And I think from probably when I was about 30, it was when I decided I want to go down the agent route. I think I went to Portsmouth at the time, and we went to administration, and there was stuff with contracts. And then I was at a few other clubs where there was really good young players coming through, and I felt that they were getting really misadvised by their agents. And sometimes, there are really good agents out there, and there's some ones that have done great for their players, but there's some that I think have misadvised their players for personal reasons, their own personal gain rather than what's right for the player. And one thing that I always say now in meetings, and I look at it and I go to my players, and then from an agent's perspective too, that there's money in football. You do well, you'll get paid, and it's same as any job. You do a good job, you want to earn money. It's the reason we go to work, right? So it's there, and I say to my young players, don't be focused on having a watch, having a nice car, having a wash bag, having nice designer clothes. Be focused on being a player and be first one in, last one to leave every day. Be the best you can be better than the day you were before, and you'll give yourself the best opportunity to be a professional footballer, and then all the rest just comes with it.
I'm so excited to welcome to the pod our new sponsors, Connection Technologies, a market leader in business-to-business tools ranging from business mobile, hosted telephony and fixed line services. Head over to their website at www.connection-technologies.co.uk, fill in their web inquiry form and find out how Connection Technologies can help your business. So I think, the perception of agents sometimes, Brian, is that players will think, oh, my agent will sort me out, or my agent will do this. I'm interested to get into, from your perspective, what are players responsible for? So when you work with a player and they're expecting you to do all this stuff for them, what solely is a player's responsibility, in your opinion?
Huge responsibility. For me, it's 90% down to the player. The agent can only do so much. And again, I say to my players, I can't put my boots on and play for you. I can't go and do that. I can't get up and be the first one into training. I can't go in the gym and do my prehab. I can't make sure I stay in the afternoon and go to the gym, or I stay out and I practice on my weak foot, or if I need to get fitter, I stay and do extra running. If I need to get stronger, I need to do a certain bit in the gym. If I need to make sure I'm living right. I can't make sure I'm going to bed on time to get up to be the best I can be in training. that's a player's responsibility. But what an agent is to advise them to do that, because some don't get it, some don't get told that. But I say to my players, make sure you're here, make sure you're there. There's one player who's now an international footballer. We said, look, we know the manager really well. If you're first one in, you've got a lot to do to impress the manager, but you're first one in, last one to leave, you do this. You trust me, the gaffer will back you. Even if you have bad times, he will back you because you're doing the right thing. And that happened, and he ended up being top goal scorer at that club last year in the Championship, and now an international footballer. Again, I didn't make him do that. I just gave him advice what he should do, but he's the one that went and put that into practice, and now he's getting the rewards, and I'm sure he's going to continue and have another 10, 12 years playing at a really high level.
Is it quite obvious then to you, you and Phil, who the most difficult players are to work with? What the difficult players to work with look like?
I think you summed it up as responsibility. Ones that don't take responsibility. There's some that they've come from club to club and it's failed. It's always the agent's fault. And I'm not talking about my players. I'm talking about players in general. It's always the agent's fault. It's blame culture. Rather than accepting responsibility, I need to do more. They can blame the agent. The manager doesn't like me. So and so doesn't like me. So and so doesn't pass me the ball. It's always a blame culture. Take responsibility and just be the best you can be every day. Leave no stone unturned, and you'll have the best opportunity. It still might not happen for you, and there still might be someone that does something else. You might get unlucky with injury. You can't, we say, control the controllables. So be the best you can be. Make sure you're doing everything extra. And it's the players that don't do that then they're the ones on the phone saying, why am I not in the team? And I say, well, did you do this week? No. Well, don't phone me on a Friday afternoon when you're not in the team, when you've not done the right things Monday to Thursday. Sometimes it is unlucky. Sometimes the gaffer will change things up. But you go, right, well, get your head down. Again, put a smile on your face. Go out there. Try even harder in training and be the best player. And it gives the manager a decision. And then you can knock the manager's door and say, look, gaffer, and if it's not the right opportunity, then we'll move you elsewhere. But if you're not doing everything right, I can't go to war for you. If I phone up a manager and say, why is he not playing? He'll kick off at me. And so you take responsibility for yourself. And I said, I will back you 100% as long as you're doing everything you can.
I can't imagine when you were playing, you ever put an agent in that situation. Is it difficult, obviously, when players reach out to you and say, this isn't going my way or that's not going my way, but I haven't done enough myself for you to obviously understand why they wouldn't do that? Like, well, talk to me about when you were a player. What sort of conversations would you have with your agent?
Not many, really. I always say, I joke to Phil and say, I wish I could looked after myself or you looked after me. I said it would have been easy life. I wanted to do my own thing. I took responsibility. Again, you knew me at the end of my career. I took responsibility for myself. I didn't want to phone my agent unless I really had to. There was a couple of occasions, I think, when I was coming out of contract at Reading, and then later in my career when there was a few different things that we couldn't really control with injuries and Portsmouth going administration, the stuff that happened when I went abroad with the contract situation. So there was stuff that you can't control. So maybe then I was phoning my agent a lot. But other than that, I just got to business and got down to it and thought the best I do, the best contract I'll get, and my agent can take care of that. I want to give the most ammo I possibly could for my agent and say, well, the gaffer can't say I didn't do this. The gaffer said I can't do that. I want to say I am top goal scorer. I have been the best player this season. I deserve what I'm asking for. You had a couple of, or probably more so than a couple, Brian, in times in your career where you were playing so well that there was interest from other clubs, right? And in the modern day, obviously social media drives a lot of that narrative, and whenever a club is interested in a player, it's sometimes made very public. I had a conversation recently with a guy that you probably know, Ross Embleton, who's the head of recruitment at Colchester, amazing guy. And I asked him, like, how do players or agents or clubs know that Colchester are interested in them? He said, well, we don't give anything away. So sometimes it's agents creating hype. Sometimes it's somebody might see Ross at a game and think, he must be going for that player. I'm interested to know how interesting players start. Like, how did that work for you in your career? How does it work from an agent's perspective now when clubs or whoever it is, head of recruitments, become interested in a player? How does that information drip feed in to people? I think it's being busy. I think a lot of it now is data driven. And again, that wasn't really around in my time, which I'm I'm gutted about, because I've looked back over the years, and there was times when my stats were through the roof that probably now would have actually got me a move, rather than just a scout come to watch me on the odd game, stuff like that. So a lot of it is data driven. A lot of it is scouts on the ground. A lot of it is agents speaking to clubs all the time, saying, what are you going to be looking for January? These particular players might be available. So there's lots of it that goes on in the background. Again, I don't like the stuff when there's stuff in the press all the time. That's something I really hate. I had it as a player myself at a particular time at Barnsley. Like I said, the year I got into the Championship Team of the Year, there was stuff 4 million here, 5 million here. I'm going for this, I'm going for that. Then the Barnsley chairman actually I remember getting a phone call in the summer one time, it was early in the morning, I think it was abroad, from a journalist saying, is it true you're going here? And your chairman's come out and said, if so-and-so went for 2 million, I'm worth 10. So then that caused a massive issue. So then I phoned my agent and say, well, why am I not going to these clubs? And he said, well, we spoke to them and they're not there yet, that they do like you, etc., but they won't pay that fee. You've got 1 year left on your deal. The Barnsley chairman's obviously trying to get as much money as possible. So then he said to the Barnsley manager, okay, or the guys at Barnsley, if I'm worth 10 million, where's my £10 million contract? Because there's not even a contract on the table. So then it just opened up a can of worms. You come back to pre-season, your head's not in it, because you think I should be moving there. Stuff in the press, you're getting this, you're getting that. So I hate all that side of it, because I think it affects people. And if there's stuff in the press now that obviously some agents do, but if an agent puts something, if we did it, my players would be on the phone saying, why have I not got that? That causes me a massive issue, because I've put that out there to try and drum up interest. It might not be that. So I think it causes more problems.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. My situation compared to your career was much, much different, mate. The only one move that I had, obviously, was from Eastleigh to Bristol Rovers. And even in that period of time, I remember the Eastleigh chairman coming to me at the time saying, the club want to offer you a new contract, but we know that there's interest from other clubs. And I spent sort of about a month, 2-3 weeks maybe, really sort of anxious about, like, what do you mean interest? Like, which club is it? What do they want me for? Like, how much might I make? What level is it going to be at? And all these sort of things that I didn't have the answer to, always built up in my mind as a player. And something actually I read online, I can't remember who it was, but it's sort of like created this dilemma that as an agent, if you have interest in a player, or if a club wants to come and watch your player, should you tell that player that interest is there? So now a player might acknowledge somebody's watching me today. Might that change their, how they perform or how they feel before a performance? Or shouldn't you tell that player so that he just goes about his normal business? And if you do tell the player, should you tell them the specific club, or just say, somebody might be coming to watch you today, and leave it? I'm interested to get your thoughts on, how do you play that?
I think you got to know your players. Different players take it different ways, but even if we do tell one of our players that there is interest from someone, there's probably about 30, 40 conversations that have happened before that point, because if someone phones you once, it's never just, right, there's a deal done. It's, right, can we afford him? Can we do this? Can we do that? And then now you have sporting directors of football, you have managers, you have coaches, you have chief execs, you have chairman, and it's got to go through all of them to get a deal done. So there's all these conversations going on all the time, all day, every day. And then we'll speak to a player and go, they'll think I'll just have one conversation, or we'll wait till the phone rings and that deal's done, where it's just constant 24/7 on the phone to people and being in the know, especially like in the build up to a transfer window. Like yesterday, obviously January's on the horizon. My phone started to ping yesterday from clubs saying, are these players available, blah, blah, blah. But again, they might be available, they might not. We've got to find out from the club if they are available. They've got to find out if they can afford him. It's an initial phone call to say there is interest, but we've only got X amount to spend on a transfer fee and a budget. And a lot of times in January, it's not a transfer fee. So there's loads of different ways to play it, but we definitely don't put things in the press and really hold off on telling the player until it's right at the last minute. We had one particular one in the summer that was quite a high-profile transfer, and that one was one where there was 3 or 4 clubs at the table. Obviously, they're all trying to bid the price down, but once they're all in, the price starts going up. Then if you say to the player, when we did sit down and say, look, these 3 clubs are the ones that can realistically do it, but this club, the one you want to go to, can only afford to pay this, and all of a sudden if there's a bidding war, but then we still got to keep the other clubs there because it's still a great option. And it's really every individual case is different.
Those conversations that you have, obviously, that from start to finish of a deal being done, it's not as simple, right, as just like manager calls you, says, oh, I like this player. You then tell the player it's done. Like there's, as you just said, there's probably loads and loads of conversations that happen even before that point. So could you try and explain to us and simplify in a way that players might understand the process of what that looks like, and how active are you as an agent in that process?
Yeah, well, very active. Obviously, you're having conversations the whole time, and it always makes me laugh when people say, oh, deadline day, you're going to be busy, there'll be something coming up, and you're like, these conversations have gone on for 2-3 months. Like you said, it's what, December the 7th, it's December 6th yesterday, I had a conversation about someone. That could happen on transfer deadline day, the 31st of Jan. But that just won't happen. They'll call on the 31st of Jan. Obviously, there's some things that do just crop up, but they're mainly like loans or a panic one. But everything happens so far like previously, and there's so much detail into every deal that you have to be heavily involved in it, and you have to sit down and be strategic and really work out what is best for the player.
And how involved is the player in that process?
Very involved. Once it gets to a level where it could happen, again, sometimes you don't want to turn a player's head. You say, oh, look, so-and-so might come in for you, especially if it's in the January window, when you're in the middle of a season, especially say if it was a Championship or Premier League now, where they're coming back from a World Cup break and then they're getting going again, and you say, oh, so-and-so's come in for you, but it might not happen. Do you really want to put that in a player's head when he's got 2 weeks, potentially 4 games away, they're packed in? He needs to be focused on those games. So it's different. It's trying to then work out which players that will affect and which players not. Obviously, you'd never do a deal without the player knowing. And it would always say, do you want to go? This is potentially there. But you have to get it to a certain level before you can tell the player.
So I want to try and get into you, Brian, if possible, for the benefit of everybody listening, maybe even people that just have an interest in football, really, is what does it look like when you begin a relationship with a player? Like when, you know, these days in football, as you know, we've just been talking about off camera about the age in which players are now starting to sign with agencies and how that works. I think agency contracts are 2 years, aren't they? So every 2 years, obviously, guys might have the option of changing or leaving, staying where they are. It's obviously a difficult process for you to be involved with, I can imagine, because if you have a relationship with a player who's signed to another agency, what does that look like? You know, where is the line drawn in terms of what's respectful and what's going behind someone's back, which I know a lot of other agencies do, from having known you and Phil for a long period of time. I know that you guys are as straight line as you possibly could be, but can you try and, you know, give us an insight into what it looks like for you to start a relationship with a player, for a player's benefit listening or watching this?
Yeah, well, I think we sat down recently and we spoke about this off camera, and we kind of said, look, we had a really good transfer window, the best transfer window we've had. I think we've done 22 deals over the summer, so crazy busy. A little bit of a break. We had some stuff with the company going on where there was interest in our company, but we sat down, you know, as business owners and said, right, where do we go? What, as you always want to do, you evaluate what you've done and where you want to go. How can we improve as agents? How can we improve as people? How can we help our current players more? And how can we help, hopefully, future clients? And you kind of sat down and started thinking, well, how have we signed players? What do we do? And probably say 90% of it's through recommendations and introductions. And luckily, you know, Phil's been an agent for 15 years, so he's got some really good contacts in the game. People trust him. Obviously, I've had my career, and a lot of my friends are now coaches and in recruitment, so they all recommend people to us. I mean, we had a really famous manager phone yesterday and say, like, my best friend's friend who went to uni with us, son is a young player, he's getting phone calls from agents, and he said, I just thought of you guys, because every player that I've had that you've represented has been a great person, but you've been fantastic throughout it. So that's amazing to hear. You know, you're doing a good job and you're doing it the right way. So a lot of it is from recommendations, and obviously it's difficult cold calling, but you always try and join up the dots. And football, as you know, everybody knows everybody. You're Mr. Football Parts, you know everybody. So you know it works, and hence why we've obviously reached out to you at times and say, do you know so-and-so? Can you have a word? And I think a lot of it, that helps when you sign a player. If I just found a young player or a young parent now, a lot of them probably wouldn't know me from my playing career, or know what we've done as an agency, because we're not in that top 3 or 4, 5, 6, 7 agencies that have these superstars. But what we do is we're good people that represent good players that want to do well. So it's a lot of it. You need that intro. Well, I mean, once you do sit down with them and hopefully you build a rapport with them, you build that relationship, then they come with you and they stay with you. And we've had a really good record of players staying with us, which it speaks volumes for us as a company that there has been high profile players of ours in the last few years that other agents have tried to pinch and tried to say, look, you need to be with a bigger agent. But it's not. It's about that relationship and that rapport you have with a player. And we are doing anything that anyone else could do as an agent. And maybe even more, just because we don't have a so-called maybe big name as an agency yet. So, yeah, it's difficult, but I think a lot of it is building relationships and having that personal rapport with someone.
Trying to break it down for people listening, players, possibly even parents that listen to this podcast. I know that some do that have, young talented children who are players and might look to this for advice. That this new wave of, we can be honest on this podcast, we're not stitching anybody up, that these agencies at the top that have a lot of financial backing are now putting money in the pockets of, players and parents from an early age to go with that agency. I don't know of any specific cases myself that I can give to people listening, but we know that it happens. When you're, say you and Phil at Momentum, have been built on a good reputation, you have an incredible relationship with your players and their families. Is that difficult world to be in, where literally money can sometimes outweigh actual values? And how can people listening to this, players and parents, separate what a good agent looks like to what a bad one looks like by taking away the financial aspect?
Trust. Like we've already touched on, the money's there in football. Money's there in football. And I think sometimes, and probably with myself as well, obviously I didn't get what the boys did, or boys are getting now, but coming out of school, I'd already agreed my pro contract. I was getting a very nice signing on fee. I was going on to more money than my mum and dad earned out of school. And it was probably too much too soon. I thought I'd made it. And again, a lot of these boys do get just unbelievable contracts at a young age. But that's not the main thing. And if you kind of look at it sometimes, I look at some lads, and I always have conversations with some of our boys now, and the parents, and they'll say, oh, his mate's at this club and he's earning this amount of money and his agent's got him this. And I'll go, okay, right, well, you're both 17, but actually your lad's out on loan playing men's football. When you're both at 21, let's see where we are, because some of them boys earn too much now. And then when it comes to 19, 20 going out on loan, clubs can't afford to take them on loan. They don't get the men's football. They get to 22. They've got no games under their belt. Well, this lad's 18 and he's played 100 games in first team football. He actually gets to deal over this lad, and actually he earns a lot more. And we've got 2 or 3 of our lads now that are 22, 23 that, again, used to say about other lads earning a lot more money than at 18, 19. Now these other lads are in League 2 or Conference earning still very good money, but not much. These lads are now on life-changing money at the top of the Championship or above. So I think it's all about trust. Trust is huge. Building a relationship with an agent who knows got the best interests of the player at heart. It's about having a 20-year career, if you can, not about 2 years making as much money as possible. So, just for an example, I met a parent the other day of a young player and got introduced to him again, an introduction, because knows another player I look after. And he said, what were you going to do? I've got 5, 6 agents calling me at the moment, offering me this, offering me that. I need to speak to Bri. Been fantastic for us. I had the same with my boy, got offered a Rolex, got offered this, got offered that. He said, but if I wanted my son to have a Rolex, I'd buy him one. Luckily, I'm a successful businessman. I want someone who's going to manage my boy's career. So I had a meeting with him and he said, I was thinking I'll just go with what every agent gets the best deal for my player. I said, well, the problem is you're going to have, as a 15-year-old lad, 16-year-old lad, you're going to have now 6 agents phoning around the same club, all saying the same thing. Actually, it looks bad on you and bad on the player. And then a club who I'm very close with spoke to me about the player and said that we do really like him, but you're the sixth agent that's called. And he said, and this is why the boys now in the year of their 16th birthday, that's when they do need agents now, because it's something I've never done before, because I always felt it wasn't quite right. But now I've looked at it and gone, actually, these boys do need this advice, because they're so impressionable at that young age, and they're coming out of school into first teams or into full-time environment, and then the parents for the first time maybe are losing that little bit of control. This is when the parents, probably more than the players, need an agent that is going to have the best interest at heart of the player, really be there and support them as a family. And it's so nice, sometimes we do get it back and say, you're almost like part of the extended family now, or some parents say, it's great now, I can just be his dad again and just watch football. Like, he doesn't want to talk to me about football anymore. It's, I'm just his dad supporting him. So I think it is so difficult. Again, I sat down with these people and I said, I would hate to be in your situation now, because there are so many agents. There's social media. There's all these different outside influences that you can't control. But then I look back and I said to Phil the other day, I was like, actually, I should be talking to these lads at 16, because at 15, I got an agent. I was sat in the room. I met 5-6 different agents. And I said to my dad, I just want you to be my agent. I just want to play football. I'm not bothered about this. And he said, yeah, but Brian, if I was going to paint the house, I'd get a professional painter. If I was going to get an extension done, then I'd get a professional builder. He said, your career's too important. Now you need a professional. And it was like, that light bulb moment. And you go, okay. And that's what I'm now saying to the young players that I'm speaking to.
That's such good advice. I knew that the average age of people getting agents was getting lower and lower, but you think it's quite important, quite relevant that guys coming out of school into full-time football look for an agent at that age for advice now, do you think?
I think you need advice. I don't think I probably shouldn't say it, because I'm probably doing myself out of something here, but you don't have to definitely sign, but you do need advice. And again, there's another example that we've been chatting to a young player at a club. He's been doing fantastic, and he's now been offered a deal. We've helped advise on that deal in the background, not tried to get involved at all, just gave the family advice. He's going to sign the contract, and through that, just being there for that family throughout that has won their trust, are going to come with us over a lot of other agencies. So there could be a risk. You might say, well, thank you for that, but anyway, let's go off. And you can't earn money off players till they're 18 anyway, which is right. So there's no point, and we never do. We never take money off lads at young pros. It's just not right. But it's about then. Let's say you gain the trust, you do the right job, and then you build up relationships with the players. And then when they go into their 20s and throughout their career, hopefully everyone gets rewarded very well.
Not everybody listening to this is going to be a player or a parent of a super talented, gifted young player, or maybe even a first team player that gets the attraction that agents reach out to sign. That when you were 15, you had 5 people lining up outside your door. Some of the guys in your youth team might have had no one. So the reason why I sort of mention that is because if I'm a player in whatever level I am, whatever age, let's just obviously we're talking about young players, but I'm a young player in a youth team at sort of a full-time club, say championship team, and I'm not the outstanding talent in my age group that has agents reaching out to them. What can they do for advice? Because I understand, like, as an agent, you spot the best talent. It's it's only natural. But if I'm a bang average player at that level or within that team, and I don't look like I'm going to massively progress, but I still want to have advice on my career, like, what sort of, in your opinion, what can they do? Where can they go?
Reach out to people. I think look, the internet's there now. The social media side of it's there now. Speak to other lads in the youth team and say, look, you've got who they get on well with, and say, who's representing you? Are you happy? Would you mind putting me in touch? Can my mum and dad have their number? Or speak to the guys in the club now. The clubs are now slowly starting to understand the players do need good agents. I mean, there was a club the other day we actually helped do part of a they put something on for the young players and their parents to say, be wary of this, be wary of this. These are the things that are going to come into your lives and game. And one of them's agents. and we helped them put together a portfolio of, say, what to look for, not look to us, but look for these signs kind of when you're looking for an agent. So there's definitely sides to look for. There's pros and cons. Like I said, everyone wants different things. Everyone's different. Some player might say, do you know what? I just want to go with an agent that's going to get me boots and it's going to get me this deal, and he can take his money, and I'm not bothered about even talking to him. Other players and parents want to talk all the time. They might be always conscious. Something might happen at training. Something might happen at the club, and it's just about being there for them all the time. So go with an agent that suits you really. And again, a really kind of famous manager once said, "You are your agent, and your agent is you. He's an extension of you. So don't blame your agent. Pick someone who's you." And I think we're like that with players as well, because there are players, some out there that, and I can say it because we've been players and been in dressing rooms. And one thing that does really wind me up is when I hear other agents that have never been a player talk about players in a certain way. Really gets me. But we've been in dressing rooms, but some players can be a handful that another agent might be willing to go through hoops for, where I want people that, again, represent me, because I built up a reputation in football where I can phone a lot of managers, and they'll have a conversation with me because they know what I'm like as a person, not just as the player, but as a person and how I conducted myself in my career. If I then phone him up and give them a player that causes him a lot of problems, next time I phone him, he's going to be like that and not take the call. I mean, a guy from a club took a call from me today. He said, "I wasn't going to take your call, Brian, but I thought it was really important, but I'm just on my way to my father-in-law's funeral." And I said, "Oh, mate, I'm so sorry. Look, call me back tomorrow." He said, "No, quickly, 2 minutes." So I whizzed through it, and he said, "Right, okay, we'll pick it up tomorrow." He said, "But I wouldn't have called anyone else back." So it's nice to have those reputations. But if I was calling, and that's because the player's a great lad, more than a really good player, he's a great lad, and he wants to make sure what's happening with him is the right thing. Where if it wasn't a good lad, or if I was an idiot, or if I had caused an issue, he's not picking up the phone to me.
It's funny you talk about how much weight being a good person holds, not only obviously for you, but for players in situations as well. That you've just given us an example of how, because the player is a good person, the coach or manager or head of recruitment, whoever it is, wants to help them and will speak to you more so than what they would a player who's challenging. But just to touch on something you just said there, obviously you created sort of like a bit of information for parents at that specific club. Can you share with us what sort of information that had on it? Like, what sort of attributes do you think are attractive in an agent?
Probably like we've already touched on. Again, I can't really give too much of it away because I wouldn't want to speak about the club or speak about too much of outside influence, anything like that. But I think it's more what we've touched on. Trust. Trust is huge. You're trusting your young son or even daughter now with the women's football. There's a lot more agencies getting into women's football, and women's football is just progressing so well at the moment, which is great to see, especially in this country with the Lionesses doing what they done, and then hopefully the men's following up in the current World Cup doing great out there. Your young child has got to be trusted with this individual. It might only be the 2-year contract to start with, for 2 years, especially for a young player, like I said, in the year of their 16th birthday or 16 going onwards. That's 2 huge years in a young adult's life, not just a professional football, and any young person that they're coming out of school, complete life-changing development, and you're still emotionally, physically, everything's still progressing as a human being, that you need someone who's going to do the right things and be there for him, not an outside influence that is going to potentially send them down the wrong path.
So talking about trust, Brian, I'm about to big you up, so please don't get too embarrassed. But something that you mentioned at the very start of the podcast that I wanted to wait, obviously, till we're midway through to get into, was the situation that you had when you left Southampton as a young player. You had a period of time at Chelsea and was offered a contract. In that time, that was the Roman Abramovich start of his era at Chelsea, and he'd obviously signed all these superstars. And you had decided against signing for Chelsea and chose obviously to go to Swindon instead to forge a career for yourself. And I think it's quite relevant that I've written down here, just so I didn't get the details wrong, that was your decision when you were a young professional. And not only, obviously, did that work out well for you, that now that you're dealing with players from an agent's perspective, the right move instead of the best move is something that you and Phil do very, very well, in my opinion. The two of you are, the reason why I asked you on it to begin with, not only because I think you're a fantastic agent, but yeah, we're friends and you're a great teammate, great friend to me. But as a person, you always seem to, your morals are good. You don't see the money, you see what's best for the player. And so a couple of examples that I've got here and success stories of what you've done is Scott Twine, for example, was obviously a super talented player at Swindon in League Two, had lots and lots of opportunities to move into the Championship, to teams that he may or may not have gone into and played. Your advice to him was to go to MK Dons in League One instead. He became the league's best player. He won an incredible amount of awards at the end of the season. He scored the most, or had the most goals and assists for, in the Football League, the most goals from outside the box. The guy was super talented, and your advice to him was to go there to then move on with more weight, which worked. That happened as well with a guy that we both know well called Rob Atkinson, who went from Eastleigh to Oxford when he could have gone elsewhere. That Oxford move for a season then enabled him to move on to the Championship, and he's played almost every game that he's been fit for since then. Marcus Harness as well, obviously went from Portsmouth to Ipswich when probably there was Championship moves for him. He's now playing exceptionally well at the top of League One, and looks like, hopefully, obviously we're talking in December, but looks like Ipswich are going to get promoted. How important is it for you to pick the right move over the best move?
You've got to look into it as much detail as possible. And like I said, it's not as simple as a manager phoning and saying, like the old days, I want to sign so-and-so and we're going to give him this and I'll see you tomorrow for the medical. He used to come in, obviously, a little bit of a cough, tap your knee, sign the medical, done. The detail that goes into it now, and we have to, as agents, if we're giving that advice and recommending these clubs, we have to know why. And Phil's much better than me at this, but I'm learning from him. The data is huge. So we looked at it with Twiney, for example. How does he play? He's not 6 foot plus. He's not a massive, strong guy, which he's worked on. And again, we told him that he needs to do these extras. And I remember once we'd done the deal to MK Dons, getting a phone call from the director of football at MK, and he said, Twiney's just unbelievable. And we said, what all these goals and they score? And he said, no, it's day before deadline day in January. It's freezing cold outside. So I'm showing a player around with trying to sign. And he said, we could hear music from the gym in the stadium. He said, so walked in the gym, and Twiney there at 7:30 at night is in the gym on his own. Because we said to him, look, if you do want to get to that next level, your talent is there. It's unbelievable, your talent. Never seen anyone hit a dead ball like him. But to do that, you've got to then be physically ready. And it goes back to the start of the conversation when I said I needed to make the most of my ability, I needed to be able to run. I needed to be able to get box to box. Twiney now realised in the positions he plays in, to get half a yard, he needs that half yard of sharpness to get his strike off, or he needs to be able to hold off a defender to get that strike off. So again, you told him that, and he's taking that way. But going back to the transfers of it, we looked into it, and like I said, there was interest in the champ. There was obviously the issue of it going to tribunal with Swindon. No one could get a deal agreed with Swindon because there was a change in ownership happening. But we said we weren't staying there because it just wasn't the right place to stay. He'd been there long enough, and it didn't quite happen for him. So we had to pick and choose a club. And MK, we looked at it and said, look, they dominate possession of the football. They create opportunities in the final third. What is Scott Twine's best ability? Finding space in the final third and goals and assists. So we said, you will get more opportunities to get goals and assists than maybe this team that should be in the top 6 of, even though it's not a top 6 budget, they've done incredible last year in K. Not top 6 budget club, but a top 6 footballing club in that league, and try and get promoted with these. And then you'll go maybe above a couple of the championship sides that are maybe lower down, where they might not dominate the ball. You'll be defending all the time. You'll lose a game, win a game. You're like a number 10. You're an attacking winger or attacking 8. If you're losing a game, your number's first one up. It's just the way football is. So you might be playing 60 minutes, and then the gaffer go, we need to change it. We're going to go, a favourite one of ours, the pitch ain't right for you, 4-4-2, or stuff like that. We'll go to MK where actually they probably build a team around you. And there's really good other young players at that football club. And if you look from that team, they had Harry Darling's now in the Championship, Swansea, Matt O'Reilly's playing in Champions League at Celtic, and Twiney has been injured, but he should be back fit for the weekend. He's then gone and got a move to Vincent Kompany's Burnley, which is another incredible, hopefully, part of his journey, because Vincent Kompany's gone in there, and again, why we picked them, probably would have gone to Burnley under Sean Dyche. No disrespect to Sean Dyche, by the way, because he's done an unbelievable job there, but he had a certain way of playing. And he wouldn't have liked Twiney. It just wouldn't have been Sean Dyche's player. Vincent Kompany's gone in and gone, actually, we're going to change the whole way we play. And obviously he's taken stuff from Pep, he's taken stuff from that he's learnt with Belgium, and the way they play. And he again, once we had permission from MK to talk to Burnley, we sat down with Vincent Kompany, and he'd done a whole presentation on the way they want to play and the way it fits Scott. So it's not just picking, they offered the most money, we're going to Burnley to come out of the Premier League. There was two or three other clubs that had matched the money and actually offered Scott more money and offered myself and Phil more money. But Burnley was the next part of the journey. So again, that's a quick fire of how it worked. That was a space of about 3 months.
One of my favourite stories that you tell me about Scott Twine is that in the off season of when he went from Swindon to MK, the Football League changed the footballs. They changed the balls from Mitre to Puma, and he went off his own back in the summer and bought those footballs so that he could practice in his dead balls, his long range shooting, which obviously was and still is an exceptional talent of his. But I mean, I can only imagine as an agent that it's just incredible to have a player that wants to help himself that much. But when we're talking about, like, obviously Scott Twine is a special case because he's super talented.
But that goes back, sorry to interrupt, mate, about a player taking responsibility.
100%.
I didn't tell him that. That's a young player, thinking, I've got a certain skill here. I want to get a head start on everyone else. So someone that probably didn't know this story has probably looked and gone, Scott Twine scored more goals outside the box in Europe last year, more than Messi. He scored, I think, the joint most free kicks. That's just not happened. Scott will probably tell me off for saying this story if he hears it, but his dad, I was with him and his dad in the summer quite a bit, and his dad runs a local cricket club and the chairman of the local sports club, and they got a goal out there. And he got goalie gloves, and he goes in goal, and Twiney just pings shots and free kicks at him. He just always practicing, and as you said, they changed the football, and he wanted to get a head start. And when he said that, the director of football or sporting director at MK, myself and Phil looked at each other and went, "Wow, that's something that I didn't even think of."
I think that's exceptional. Obviously, bearing
in mind he was on very little money coming out of Swindon then, so it probably cost him 2 weeks' wages to go and buy them balls. So he's invested in himself.
Yeah, them footballs expensive, isn't they?
Yeah. But because of that, though, I managed to get a couple of the old Mitre ones for the back garden, so I was happy with that.
That's obviously an example of an exceptionally talented player combined with an exceptional work rate. And, touch wood, fingers crossed, one day he might come on here and share some of his secrets. But, those stories, obviously, that you tell me, that we can tell people here without knowing him, obviously listen to some of his interviews, and he comes across like an incredible person as well. But for the guys that aren't Scott Twine, that aren't super talented, how do you think, in your opinion, that they can decide what is the right move instead of the best move necessarily? Sometimes the best move is the right move, but, if I'm let's take, for example, Rob Atkinson, who was a National League player with Eastleigh, super talented. What was the right move for him?
Again, that was something we looked at. There was a lot of interest, as you knew, a lot of clubs that wanted to take him. But again, it was a stepping stone, and that's, again, not being disrespectful to Oxford. It was like we knew that if he didn't go to the Championship with Oxford, he would go to the Championship on his own. Obviously, the idea was to get promoted at Oxford. They were in the top 6 at the time in the playoffs. They'd just lost Rob Dickey to QPR, and I think Wes Nelson had just moved on as well. But they had a history of centre halves moving on, so we thought that if we moved him there, he'll go and play in a really good team under a really good manager, and he'll progress. And if the team doesn't progress with him, he'll move, and Oxford will do the right deal, where some other clubs potentially would have asked for stupid money and wouldn't let the individual player progress in his career. So again, it's all those little things you have to look at. And again, it was a shame that Oxford got beat in the playoffs because of that, and he outshone and he outgrew the club at the particular time. He's moved on. The club earned a lot of money. And again, from Eastleigh letting him go, they earned money down the line from sell-ons.
I know that a lot of players these days, especially modern day football, young guys would like their agent to speak on behalf of them more often than not. If there's a circumstance with the manager or with the club, you know, I can imagine you're on the phone all the time, being the middleman between a player and a manager who probably are together during the day, and then you have to go in the afternoon and speak to that manager about what the player's thinking. I'm interested to know it and get your idea of, you know, what should be an agent's responsibility for a player, and how much players, you know, we've talked about responsibility, you know, a little bit in this, and we've talked about training, really, like training standards, gym, how you live in your life. Like, are players giving themselves the best possible opportunity for you to do the, you know, your job for them as best you possibly can? But conversation-wise, and things that aren't necessarily football-related, but could be a player's out of the team and wants to know why he is. How much do you think the players should feel comfortable having those conversations themselves, instead of obviously putting that information into you and expecting you to then go and have that conversation with the manager?
Again, responsibility. I think the player's got to do that himself. If the manager has got to trust you to go out on a Saturday afternoon or a Sunday afternoon or Monday night, whenever these games are now, and they've got to trust you to perform for him, to keep him in a job, he's got to see that maturity and you taking responsibility yourself. So if all of a sudden he's not in the team, and I phone a manager on a Friday, I'd never do it on a Friday anyway, but I phone a manager over the weekend or on a Monday and say, why is he not playing? He'd go nuts at me and he'd lose respect for that player. And again, when I said I never used to bother my agent, I would always knock the door myself. I wanted to know myself. And then the way it always then comes round is that the manager would probably tell me something. By the time it comes back to the player, you lose something in translation somewhere and something goes wrong anyway. So take responsibility. Obviously, sometimes it's difficult for young players, but I think it's the way you ask the question as well. You can't just knock the manager's door and go, Gaffer, why am I not playing? Or kick off. You've got to say, Gaffer, look, what's going on? What can I do more? What do I need to improve on? Can you help me with things, especially for a younger player? And I think, obviously, this more we spoke about younger players in this. You've really got to say to the manager and get the manager on board so the manager can trust you. I met a young player this week, and they're got a new manager at the football club, championship club, and he cleans the manager's boots. I said, that's perfect. And he said, he looked at me, what, why? I said, you getting a reason to talk to the manager every day. So give him his boots. I said, Gaffer, how you doing? Blah, blah. I'm hoping to be out with you soon, and blah, blah, and I'll play this position. And the manager played a similar position to him. Can you give me some advice? And I said, young managers now will love that, and they want you to be a sponge, and you need to get the manager on board with you. And as long as you're doing the right things, the manager will respect you. It's when you start not doing the right things. And again, I didn't in my career, I hold my hands up and I always say this to my players as well. Sometimes I got left out the team and I'm kicking balls away and losing my head. But I've learned from that now. So I always say to my players, there's a way of doing it. And it's, again, you got to be respectful to the manager. He's got decisions to make. And sometimes it's hurtful, sometimes it's not. If it's a personal reason, then we've got an issue, and that's when we need to look at other clubs. But if not, there's always an issue that can be hopefully improved. So whatever that improvement needs to be, whether it's in training, whether it's doing a certain positional thing in a game, speak to the manager. And the managers are so busy now, they've got so much to do, they don't really have time to speak to each individual. But if you actually make time to speak to the manager or the coach and work on those things to try and improve yourself to get in the team, then it'll be better down the long run for you.
And keep his boots clean.
Yeah, exactly.
At the end of the day, obviously, like an agent is due to be paid off when a player moves, right? And I guess one of the blurred lines of player and agency agreement, especially probably, you know, I know we're focused heavily on young players, but even for established pros really, is how do agents make money off players moving? So if possible, as simply for people to understand as possible, you know, some players might move, some players might stay at the same club. What is the process, of an agent making money off that process? And what do players need to understand before that process happens?
So So again, we always make sure, as you know, we sit down with the player and say, this is exactly what we're getting paid. Doesn't come out of your salary. It's for people that don't know, it's a benefit in kind. And if anyone does want to know, that we use the basic FA contract, which you can find on the FA website, and it does have it in detail of how that works. And then so obviously the club will pay you, and then in the following year's tax, the agency fee will be a benefit in kind for the player. So same as his insurance, etc. Obviously, the more the player earns, the more the agency will be, the more tax you have to pay. But we always make sure that the player knows exactly what that is.
And so, what off the back of that, mate? What are the biggest misconceptions that you find that people do have about agents?
I think they find, especially when you talk to fans, agents are the devils in football. They cause issues, they cause problems, all for their own personal gain and their personal greed. They'll do moves for players that they don't need to do moves for. They'll cause problems at clubs. They'll put stuff in the press. They'll cause problems for managers. There's, I mean, if you just Google agents, everyone's on about it. I mean, there's some stories out there where people haven't done themselves any favours at all, and obviously you kind of get roped in that. And again, when we speak to some parents now and players, and they go, "Oh, well, agents are this, agents are that," and then when you speak to them and you talk more, they go, "Oh." And again, there's a player I look after who's a young Wales international, like yourself once were parts, and his dad turned around the other day and he said, "I always thought agents were this and this and this." He said, "Now I see what you have to deal with." He said, "I respect you so much," and he said, "Actually, there's a couple of the players' teammates, parents that he spoke to recently, and they've had nightmare stories that happen with their agents. Again, I don't know the agents, I don't know other people and how they do their business, and I don't want to really talk about other people. Everyone's got their own way of doing things." And he said, "The way you've done things and the way you've looked after us, I can't thank you enough." And again, so that's what it makes the job worthwhile. Obviously, you do want to earn money and get paid. We've got bills to pay, but that makes it the job's so satisfying, if you know what I mean. And the best bit of my job, I love stuff like that. I love having relationships with the players and their families, and I love going to watch them play. Don't have kids myself, but when I watch my players, especially the young ones breaking through and being part of their journey, if I've just had 1% that's helped them along that way, you kind of, you feel proud of where you've got to.
Yours and Phil's relationship could end up being a nice advert for Men's Sports Management, because you guys have obviously have always helped me, done such an incredible job, and are helping a lot of people. But Phil, for example, never played the game. It's been an agent for years and years and years. Incredible, really, that he's managed to be so successful without that playing career. Because as you know, an agent or a player's perspective of an agent might often be like, "Oh, he played it here." Like, oh, if somebody would introduce you as their agent, it's like, "Oh, Brian Howard's." He's what I touched on earlier. He scored a goal against Liverpool in the FA Cup quarter final. Like, it's it holds a lot of weight. How challenging is it? And you can speak on behalf of Phil, but for the pair of you to overcome that stereotype of that you have to have played a certain level. I know that you and Phil work together very well, but what's that like?
We don't really think about it too much, really. I think that there's just a perfect balance, really. He didn't play the game, but he's been in the game for 15 years. He was in the game on the outside of it before that, because his dad, Selwyn, was an accountant for footballers before there was really agents. So again, looked after lots and lots of footballers when it was pretty much all footballers needed was an accountant and a lawyer just to look over a contract. So he was always in and around it, so understands it, and he always says it. He always laughs and says, "I'm just a geek." He says his friends bullied him at school, but now he says, "Now I know they were taking a mickey." Called me Stato. He said, he's just loves football, and especially now, it's perfect for me and our business. That obviously I know the football side, and I'm learning more the data side. But the data side, honestly, I can't stress enough how important it is coming into football. You see, especially the American ownership coming in as well. Obviously, the Moneyball system. You look at Brentford, Brighton, they run it like that. And you look at the players they've signed and where they've taken their clubs to then establish them as good Premier League clubs and still make a lot of money by buying these players for relatively little money that no one else knew about and moving on. Feels just into that data market so much, and it just helps give us something different that we might not look after a Jack Grealish, we might not look after a Marcus Rashford, a Harry Kane, but what we do is something different. So we look at things how we can be different that can still add so much value to a player's career. So we got a really good balance, myself and Phil, and it's weird because we've been in business together now 5 years. Obviously, built it up from nothing, and you were there at the start. So where we've got to, we're proud of where we got to. And again, that's what we said over the last couple of months. We've said, right, how do we become better agents? We don't think we're the perfect agents, which is crazy me saying that when people listening go, I don't think because I don't think anyone ever is, and I don't think anyone's a perfect player. I don't think anyone's the perfect podcaster. Everyone can always improve, and I think unless we look to improve, how can we ask our players to improve? And so we drive each other, but we never argue. It's crazy. We don't think we've had an argument over. We always come to the same solution. And I say we don't argue. We'll put together our case, but we'll make sure there's facts or data or something behind it that in the end, whoever maybe one didn't agree with at first or wasn't quite on his board, we go, right, that's what's best for the player, yeah. So again, that's kind of how it works in the background. And I think he jokes, his missus always says to him, you speak to Brian more than you speak to me and the kids. And it's always, we probably speak 10, 15 times a day. And I was on the phone to him for 25 minutes on the way here today to meet you. So, and we're always just having brainstorms and different things. And again, he's got different connections that I didn't have, and vice versa. And a lot of them do link up. And I think in football, you're always one, maybe two max people away from knowing who you need to speak to. And so it just works great.
Yeah, you guys do work incredibly well together. And I want to get on maybe this importance, just sort of coming towards the end, but the importance that you guys now are seeing on the data. Can you break down when you say on the data, can you break down what data means?
Well, if anyone's watching the World Cup at the moment, you'll see stuff come up and it'll be like most receptions between the lines. It'll be most recoveries, etc. There's little things that I've seen come more and more into play on live football. But in the background, every single club now pretty much got a data analyst. So they'll say, the way our manager wants to play or our sporting director want this club to play moving forward, we want to play with a 3-4-3, or we want to play with a 3-5-2, or 4-1-4-1, whatever way we're going to go. But in each position, these players need to have these strengths. And again, obviously, the further down the period, you're not going to get as many boxes, because obviously the ones that tick all the boxes are at the top level. So what they'll do is then they'll look and go, right, if I'm a centre-half, if I'm a League Two club and I need a centre-half, we're in a dogfight, I need someone who's got the most aerial duels one, the most first contacts one, the most tackles one. And if there's a centre-half available that's got 3 out of 4 of them, that's how they'll probably sign a player. The same with, the Championship. Now we spoke about Vincent Kompany. He said, I want a player who can play in this position, that receives the ball on the half turn, gets this many receptions, he gets this many shots off, he gets this many crosses, expected goals, expected assists. Because sometimes you don't just go off goals and assists, you go on expected, because you might be playing in a League One club and you might be a fantastic winger that creates 7 chances in a game, but the striker hasn't scored those goals. So you go, well, but if you were playing with then a Premier League or Championship striker, he's then scored 6 of those 10 chances you created. You've got 6 assists rather than 1. So there's so much that breaks down, and people probably listen going down a rabbit hole here, and we could end up speaking for hours about it. And again, that's how Phil's got me into it. The more and more you look into it, the more I'm intrigued by the detail that goes into signing every single player. But that's what happens now. This is the detail that goes into signing players. It's not just the fact of me phoning up someone and say, look after Joe Parnton, brilliant player, can play right wing back, can play right side centre half, can play centre mid. These are his strengths. And they go, okay, great. Thanks for letting us know he's available. But what we'll do is we'll look at his data. We'll look at his stats. How many minutes has he played? How many 90 minutes does he get through? Because if we're paying money for someone, I need someone that's going to be on the pitch for 90 minutes as much as possible. If someone's playing 60 minutes every week, there must be something wrong there with fitness. Or there might not be, but then it's up for an agent to explain the reason why. No, gets to 60 minutes, the gaffer likes to freshen it up. You spoke about Marcus earlier, and Ipswich quite a lot this year because they've got so much attacking talent. he'll quite often freshen it up. Even if players are having great games, there's been games where Marcus has scored or got an assist, and he might come off on the 70th minute to freshen things up because of that much attacking talent. They want to change it, and you see it with like the big clubs, your cities, and the way they change things. So yeah, it's very different now, and it's just so important, that data.
I think it's incredible the amount of importance that clubs are now putting on data, and I was aware that data was relevant, but not that much.
That you still got to have eyes on a player. You still got to have your scouts that have spotted players for years and years and years that know a player, because again, those stats might be coming up. You go, well, but why has he still been there for an extra year? You might go watch him and go, his body language is wrong. Actually, those three things going forward are brilliant, but he doesn't do those three things going back, and he doesn't look like he wants to. And again, that's that information that needs to come back to the agent when they scout him and they go, right, you need to, when you lose the ball, you might be getting away with it at your club because the manager wants you to do so much going forward, but you need to do more getting back. You need to do more regains in the final third. You need to be doing this, or you won't get that move.
Do you think the players now need to be more aware then of what their data is showing other people? So like you've just used an example of, I might be a forward player who gets the most expected assists in the league, right? So when people are looking at expected assists, they're seeing my name pop up. However, defensively, I'm not great. Do you think players now need to be aware of the things that they're not statistically good at, because it might end up being a reason why someone doesn't go for them?
Yeah, I think so. And we always speak to all our players about data, but all the players get their data from clubs now. After each game, they'll get their... It's not used to be just a pro zone stats, didn't it? Like how far you've run, high intensity. Now it's all your running stats, it's all your possession. It's all so accessible for every player if they want it. And we touched a bit on Jacob Brown earlier, who's now an international footballer. And that came from he didn't really have any education in football, and he come from non-league at 17 into Barnsley, broke into the first team alone at Chesterfield, and then he's now playing for Stoke, finished their top goal scorer, first player to get 10 goals in the league for Stoke since Peter Crouch, and now an international footballer. But a lot of that has come down to, right, I need to polish off on my finishing, I need to polish off on this, but what's going to keep me in a team and get me to that point where I get the opportunity to improve that is by what am I good at? I'm physically great. I'm going to be the fittest I'm going to be the first one in training. I'm going to do the most in high intensity runs in the team. I'm going to win the most aerial duels I can. So all those stats are fantastic. And then he stayed in the team because he's kept them at such a high level that now all of a sudden his expected goals, his expected assists, his touches inside the box, all the other bits you want from a striker are now coming to fruition. And again, he's just turned 24. He's a relatively still young player, but he's got 200 games under his belt. And now he's learning this side. You think he could go anywhere in the next 4 or 5 years in his career.
And so you obviously, as Jacob's agent, for example, are you aware of his, the stats of the data, even if he's not? Like how involved in that process might or I guess are you? But should an agent be maybe?
Yeah. We can find that out. There's lots of different. Sites and stuff
like the Y Scouts
and all the different ones like that. But Stoke are really good with it. And Jacob, again, he takes responsibility and he goes and asks, and then he'll send them to us on the group chat, and we look at them. And it's not very often we go, Jacob, come on, they're down. Normally it's like, wow, that's just like incredible. His running stats is just an absolute machine. But he's taking responsibility to keep it. So if that drops down, and he might not get the chances consistently to get goals that keep him in the team, he needs to be bringing something. But all of a sudden, when he kept in the team, he got goals.
I'm conscious that we've, the examples of players that we've spoken about with you are great examples of that. Not all players take responsibility like Jacob does, and Rob, Marcus, and Scott Twine. What sort of, you don't have to name names, I'm not looking for names, but like examples of players that don't take responsibility for their own games. How challenging is it for you as their agent? Because what I'm trying to get at is of course, it's not rocket science. Take responsibility for your own game. You shouldn't need an agent to do, to live your life for you. But the guys that aren't doing that might be listening to this, they probably won't, because this podcast is for people who want to improve. But those guys that are not taking responsibility, how challenging is it for you not, I'm not going to say to represent them, but to help them in their career?
I don't think we have any. And again, that's part of the process of us also signing players. I have walked away from meetings before and said, I don't want to sign that player. That doesn't represent what we're about.
Because some people might think, like, agents will just sign everyone for...
And I go, good player, very good player, could earn me some good money. But that's not why I'm an agent. That's not what I'm about. I was like, let someone else that's got that mindset look after the player. That's a perfect match. But that is more of a headache than it'll be worth earning any money. And again, that would take time away from the lads that I'm giving other advice to that are taking it on board and all improving. And you spoke about all those players, and there's some younger ones as well that have done other things. There was a young lad who was going to get his pro, but he needed to earn it. And we asked why he hasn't got it. And they said, because when he's been in the first team in the 21s, his running stats are there. When he's in the 18s, they've dropped to there, which again is a natural human thing that we've done it. You go, I've played in this game at that level, and I'm dropping down here. I don't really want to be out here today. And you go through the motions, and they said he can't do that. He needs to be there. And again, so we found that information from the club, pulled it back to the player. Next game, runs 13.5k, gets back into the first team squad, on the bench of the first team, gets his pro contract. So it's not rocket science, but again, if we didn't do that and we just said, he's not getting his pro, let's concentrate on someone else, it might not have played out that way. But again, that's what we want to do. We want to be proactive and be different.
I'm so pleased we've had this conversation. We've got into quite a lot here, really, about that. If anybody anywhere, needed to understand the relevance or importance of what an agent can do for you, I think this conversation is really refreshing and can really help quite a lot of people, Bri. But to finish, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. I've got some quick fire questions for you that we'll get into a little bit. It can be from your playing days or just in life in general. But my first one is always, what is the best piece of advice that you have ever received?
Be better than you were the day before. And I know our good friend Paul Reed always says it, but I've heard it from a few people. And that's what you can be. And that's not just being in football. I think that's where you try and live your life. Be better at whatever it is you do, whether it's being a better person or whether it's being a better parent, whether it's being better at your work or just better in general. That's all you can do in life and learn. So that's probably the best advice.
Who gave you that?
I've heard it from many people.
Just a lot of avenues, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of avenues. I think it's one that, because I've heard it from a few, it really sticks in. And every time I heard it, I go, I might have forgot about trying to be better because I'm annoyed at something and something really gets you down. So there's that. And another one I like, me and Phil use it a lot, is control the controllables. So just control what you can control. There's so much stuff in life that you can't control that does your head in and you end up going insane about, that affects the stuff you can control. So that's something that we always say to each other, because something will happen and I'll lose my head or Phil will do, and we'll panic about something. We can only control what we can control.
I think that's a massive one. A lot of players talk about that, but only taking responsibility for things that they can control. My second is, we might have spoken about him, but who's the most outstanding talent that you've worked with, and what was it about him that has made you say that?
I don't like to pick one. I think that if you're talking about players that I represent, everyone else has got their own unique pros, and everyone's got their own unique downfalls. And everyone has got a downfall, whether they think it or not. But everyone's so unique. But I just love looking after good people that want to do better. And if anyone does look through our socials or anything like that, I think nearly every player we've had has had an upward journey until they got into their 30s. One that we didn't really touch on was a unique one of Christian Burgess up in Belgium, and just an incredible story. So if we talk about like one of the favourite stories, it's probably Burge. Leaving Portsmouth, taking the plunge, going out to Belgium in their second division, winning it by record points, and then actually winning the top division. It's like Leicester winning the Premier League here, against Club Brugge, against Standard Liège, all these clubs that have got good money out there. This club comes from League Two or the second division and wins the league, and then they do a stupid playoff system, so lost in the playoffs. But again, they've continued that. And I was lucky enough to go to Glasgow and watch them in the Champions League tie against Rangers, which unfortunately lost, but they've gone to the Europa League and they've won their Europa League group against Union Berlin, who were top of the Bundesliga before the break, and Sporting Braga, who are a massive club in Portugal, and Malmo, which again is a famous European club. And they've won that group, which actually gets them through to the last 16. So now the last 32 Europa League, which Man United play Barcelona and Ajax are in, and Juventus, they're already through to the next round. So when you're talking about an incredible journey, that's an incredible journey. But and Christian's 30 now, and hopefully he's got a really good few years left of enjoying playing in Europe. Which again, when he came on as a client, he left another agency and came with us. He was playing in League One, again playing at a great club, Portsmouth, who he will always be a fan's favourite for and hopes to play for again one day. But now he's going to play European football, which is an incredible story. And then the majority of the rest of our younger ones have got huge futures ahead, I'm sure, and incredible journeys. And there's just so much different. I could say we could sit for hours, and I know people don't have time to listen and talk about every individual journey. But I spoke to one player yesterday. He's now playing in the Championship. That he had to drop into non-league and fight all his way back. And then he was at a club that wouldn't sell him. And again, he got an opportunity to go back to Leeds to sign a contract longer than he probably should have, but felt he had to. And now, when we had an opportunity in COVID to move him, it was COVID times, and he actually took a less contract to play in the Championship. He said, I've worked this hard, I need to play in the Championship. And then he got a new deal straight away, and now he's playing in a team that played in the playoffs of the Championship last year. And again, I spoke to him yesterday and just spoke about his journey and everything we've been through, and he's just a great lad as well. So I just love being part of people's journeys.
I mean, that's one thing that you touch on quite a lot. Obviously, with the guys that you work with, that they're great people. I must add, I don't know Christian Burgess, but I know that in lockdown and stuff like that, he was doing Zoom calls with one of my best friends' kids' team and things like that, and just stuff like that for somebody who doesn't have to go out of his way to do that. I'm sure, obviously, he's close with you and Phil, so you might end up listening to this. So, being a good person, I think if one thing comes out of this conversation amongst everything else on advice for agents and for players, is that being a good person holds so much weight.
Yeah, huge. Even with Christian, I saw something the other day. He posted something about doing something in the community for Portsmouth at Christmas. I mean, he's over in Belgium and he's posting that about the community in Portsmouth because it played such a big part in his life. And through stuff like that, I don't know if it was a European game or a recent game in the league, the group of Portsmouth supporters got together and a load of them travelled out there. And now they're on about going out to watch the next European game because they're Portsmouth fans, but they support Virgil, what he's done, not just for the football club, but what he's done for that community.
Yeah, incredible. Next one, mate, is what do you think all young players should know on their journey to aspiring to be a professional?
It's a very short career. Very short career. Don't ever think, I'll do that tomorrow. I'll do that tomorrow. I won't go to the gym today. I'll do that tomorrow. Or, I'll see the manager tomorrow. Or, I won't worry about that. It's so short, as you know. Honestly, we talk about when we were back playing when we were youngsters. Obviously, when you were young at Bournemouth and playing for Wales as a youngster, myself at Saints and playing for England. Someone sent me a picture of one of my games the other day they found, and you look back and go, oh, that seems like yesterday. And now
I see that on Instagram. It was against it was one of the other player was famous, right? He's had a good career. I can't remember. It was
Mascherano.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, it was. Yeah,
I was sat on the Barcelona thing. Yeah, it's as close as I've got to him still. But honestly, that seems like yesterday. So they need to make the most of every day as a professional footballer. And as you know, it is the best career. If you're into football and you want to be a footballer, it's the best career. I still come across players now that go, I don't really like football, but it's a job. What? Go get a real job. It's freezing cold outside. There was building work going on there. There's guys freezing on a roof. Go to play football. It's just incredible. So I'd say it is such a short career, so you need to make the most out of it.
That's great advice, mate. My next one is, in your opinion, what is the most important attribute needed to make it?
Attitude. You've got to have the best attitude. I can't remember who I was talking to. It was a recruitment guy from a Premier League club that's got a famed academy, and he said what they look for, and it's called three A's or something. And when they look for a player, attitude's number one. So you could be out there and you could score 5 goals. Obviously, they're still going to like you, but if your attitude's not right, they're still going to have question marks. So you've got to have the best attitude.
It's funny, you'll know him, a guy called Des Taylor, whose podcast will have come out by now, who's sort of head of recruitment at Bournemouth. He says that he goes to watch warm-ups before he spots a player, and if the body language of the player is in a warm-up isn't as he would expected it to be, then he'd leave or go home, or just it would change his perception of the player off the back of that. It's incredible actually how much, let's just let agents, scouts, head of recruitment, managers even, the things that they look for that players wouldn't really expect it to be like that.
Exactly, and that's what we touched on earlier. We said all the stats might add up, but they might go to a game, and someone like that might not warm up properly, or he might not do something right, or he actually might come off in the game, and he might kick off. And obviously we're in the moment where Cristiano Ronaldo didn't play last night, and he kicked off in the game before. It doesn't matter who you are, you act like that, and then you get left out, and it's 50-50 way it goes. If Portugal struggle and he come on and get the win, that's great. And the lad come on and scored a hat-trick. That might be him sat on the bench now. World Cup career done. Is it just because he kicked off? I don't know, but that might have a thing. So and I think some advice I'd always say, in football, somebody is always watching. And someone said the other day, I don't really want to play in this game. Well, why? Because you never know who's watching. I actually got a move once from playing in a behind closed door training ground game that I really didn't want to play in because I'd fallen out with the manager, and I played, and the next day I was moving to another club because they had someone there watching.
Brilliant. That's pretty like genius that the someone's always watching. Something I asked Des about as well. I said, how real is that? I was like, is that just a myth or not? He said, no, it's bang on. It's so true. My next one, mate, is the opposite really. What is the thing players need to not be if they're going to make it?
I was going to say arrogance, but I think you need some arrogance. I think you need to be confident.
Do you think confidence and arrogance are the same thing? Or
it's a fine line. I think it's very debatable, and I think some of the top pundits and top people in football always have that debate. And you look and go, Cristiano Ronaldo, would you say Messi? These players that have been at the top of the game, Wayne Rooney over there, they've got arrogance, but it's confidence, and it's how you portray that. So it's probably like the opposite of attitude. You can't have a bad attitude. You can't just think I've made it. That's it. And you can't just think my ability is going to get me through, because you might be the best kid at under 13s, under 14s, under 15s, under 16s, under 17s, under 18s, under 19s going to the men's game. Now you've got every kid in the world that's been the best player at your age group, that some are 10 years older than you, some have played 500 games. So it's never just going to get you through. You need to work out, how am I going to be better than him? And if you're in your early mid-20s, you got to think, how can I be better than him? But actually, I've got this youngster coming through behind me that's trying to be better than me. So I need to always improve. And that's why I always say, be better than they were before, because there's always someone trying to get you from there, and you've got to try and catch them.
Absolutely. Next one, mate, is football has moved on so much in terms of agency in the past 10 years. Where do you think it will be in 10 years from now?
God, that's a magic question. There's been lots of conferences lately. FIFA are trying to change the rulings on them, trying to control it more. I think at that top level of the game, obviously you see so much of it documented, and I've not been in that level of it, so I can't say it's 100% true, but you see so much documented of your top agents that go, he's going to go there and I want this fee. Actually, fair, they can command it. They can get what they want. So they're trying to, I think, regulate it. They can only get a certain percentage, blah, blah, blah. So but then it can cause so many problems that will open up another can of worms. They're on about re-regulating it, where you have to have you have to pass the exam and get your license, where now you just have to pass your tests online and pay for your license. So now they're on about re-regulating it, but ones that had agency licenses before, i.e. fielded, passed the exams, had his official license, and they took that away. That wasn't there when I became an agent. So now all of a sudden, if they say you have to pass the exam, and if you don't pass it, I don't think you can take it for another 6 months. What happens with my clients. I've built up a business here. You can't just take my business away. So I really don't know where it will be.
But the situation seems to be ongoing.
Yeah.
I want to finish with this, Bright, because it's going to, maybe combine your football career both with your agency opinions as well. But what advice would you give to a young Brian Howard just starting out his football career?
Don't think you've made it at 15, 16 years old. Like I said, I got that contract at Southampton, and to be fair, Southampton, what great club and great to come through as an academy player. But I think maybe as well, I had an opportunity to move, maybe moving away from home and growing up quicker. Maybe do that, but don't think you've made it. Like I said, there was things that I didn't do extras all the time, as in gym, bits and pieces that would have improved me physically quicker to become a better player quicker. I would stay out and do free kicks. I'd stay out and do corners. I'd stay out and do passing. I mean, I loved training, but I didn't do the stuff that I didn't like doing. I hated the running at that time. I hated the gym. I just wanted to play football. So I would always be first one out and last one in on the training pitch, but I'd be last one in, first one out in gym. Which is crazy thing about it now, because, and like I said, I'd read my pro contract agreed, and it's funny because all the guys that were at Southampton at the time are now at Fulham, so we're going to Fulham and always catch up with them, and they said, again, one of their regrets is not pushing me. It's because you were so talented at your age group, that you weren't really pushed. It was just there, and we probably didn't push you enough because we just let you're that talented on the pitch and performing on the weekend. We let you kind of just do what you wanted. He said we had then the group a couple of years below that, then you had your Matt Mills, your Theo Walcotts, your Dexter Blackstocks, your David McGoldricks, your Simon Gillette's, like the players that then come through after, they were all together and pushed. And he said, the 3 or 4 that made it from my group, you weren't really pushing. Fair play myself, Scotty Mack, Aaron Davis, Mike Williamson, and Chris Baird, obviously a year older, had good careers. But he said, really, that group should have been pushed harder. That would have had 10 of you had careers like the next 10 did.
I think that's probably nice for you now, knowing that you're in a situation where you can obviously tell these young players that you work with, or the current pros that you work with, to use your experiences to obviously better theirs. I think you're doing an incredible job of that so far.
Thanks, mate. But yeah, that's what I say to him. I said, look, my career didn't start there and finish there. It was like that. And so every experience you think you'll experience on your own, trust me, I've experienced something similar, or I've had a close teammate or someone that's been through it. And, I've had the ups and downs of getting good deals, getting dropped, getting good deals, change of manager, new manager doesn't like you, go on loan, come back, injured, short-term deal because you're injured again. Like, been through it all. And it's about just trying to stay on that same level as much as possible, rather than getting 2 down or 2 up.
I think that's a nice way to finish, mate, because obviously, as we know, that football is up and down, but I'm also conscious by these podcasts only focus on all the good. I think it's quite nice that you've just touched on there that you didn't have a career that was always up. You had an incredible career, to be honest, mate. And as I've started with, it was a pleasure for me to have ultimately played with you at Eastleigh. But that I think realisation, that humility to understand what the game is and how to get the best out of it is something that you now have gone on to give incredible advice to the people that you work with. I think they're much better for that.
Thanks, mate. And I think what I do is probably give them advice on all the things that I've done wrong more than well, because they know what to do well. But it's, do you know you're doing something wrong? And like, as I just touched on then, I was never told I was doing something wrong, just because the things were so good I was doing good. And we spoke about it then. I was in a picture playing against Mascherano, and then in the game before there was Mascherano, Zabaleta. I looked at pictures today, Tevez, Maxi Lopez, and we beat them that day. And someone said to me, you must look back at that and feel really proud. And I was like, not really, because I was better than them that day. And I said, the game before was played against Italy, and they played against De Rossi, who I think won the World Cup in 2006. And I ran rings around him that day, but he had a different mindset or whatever, that he's gone and played in the World Cup and won the World Cup, and I didn't. So I've done something wrong along the way. And so from learning from those experiences, they're the more important, more sort of hitting home experiences that go as a young player. So I spoke to one earlier who scored a load of goals the other day. You might be scoring them goals, but don't rely on it now. You've got to keep going there. So
I think, that honesty, mate, that you do show is quite refreshing, really, because, you know, if anybody who's watching, you've probably got clients that are going to listen to this who obviously know your story and know your personality, but there might be future clients that listen to this that are going to be able to get to know you. So firstly, I want to say thank you, mate, for coming and joining me. I know you've been on your case a little bit. We've just about managed to get you on. And secondly, thank you for giving such an honest perspective of football from an agent's view, because I think quite often I've asked a couple of players about what they think a good agent looks like, and that can, you know, be misconstrued sometimes because different players have different opinions. But from your perspective, I've said perspective quite a lot on this podcast, from your view, I think it's really nice to get that point of view so that people listening to this who are hoping to improve their own football can understand actually what it is you do, what conversations you're having on their behalf, how they can help themselves, and ultimately how they can help you do the best job for them. So thank you, Brian. I really appreciate your time.
Pleasure, mate. Thanks for having me on.
Perfect. Cheers, guys.